Well, it's that time again. That time when we stroll into the silver-screened theater, popcorn in hand, to discuss Christian entertainment and engaging with the world of entertainment. And I'm joined today by Greg and Richard.
Yo.
Yo.
Hello.
And I'm your host, Chris, and this is Three Pastors Walk Into a Bar.
Maybe it should be walk into a movie theater.
Well, it's a movie theater that is a bar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Movie theater that serves drinks.
Yeah. We had one of those.
They have those.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had one of those in Florida. It was actually called the Silver Screen Theater.
Yeah. We saw one in Houston when we were down there last. It's with the easy chairs,
Yeah.
the recliners.
They
and
had
stuff.
tables, and they had like swivel leather chairs, and you could order drinks and food.
Yeah.
And,
Sweet.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. They don't have anything like that here in Idaho.
Not yet.
But of course, who goes to the theaters anymore besides Richard?
Yeah.
I
actually
do.
went yesterday.
Yeah.
I do. I like watching certain movies on the big screen.
I do too, but they have to be like epic, like action movies. I can't like go watch dramas at the theater. It just seems pointless.
Like
to me.
Transformers.
Transformers was an action film that Richard just went to go see.
Yes.
Yeah.
3D though, so
3D.
kids loved it. And it was,
Yeah.
and it's
Some good redeeming values there.
Did it
you
look
know
like,
what's going to happen.
Did it look like Optimus Prime was in the room?
No,
No.
but yeah, it wasn't as good. The 3D I thought in Avatar: Way of Water was spectacular, but the
It was
3D
good, yeah.
in this one wasn't nearly as well done.
Was
Kinda like they-
Optimus still around
Oh, sure.
in this one?
Oh, you'll have to watch the movie and see.
Yeah, you can't have a Transformers movie without,
Without
Optimus,
Optimus
Prime.
Prime.
It doesn't even make any sense. It's like watching a Harry Potter movie without
Yeah,
Harry Potter.
There might be another Optimus Primal sort of character. You just have to watch.
He might be a big gorilla, too.
Might be a big gorilla.
Got
Could
a
be.
tickler.
Rise of the
Could
Beast.
be. It's a potential that it could be in there.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. That's been on every
Let's just
trailer.
say, tell us what happened. Give
It's
us
been
the
on every
ending.
trailer ever made of it. Yeah.
Yes. Watch any Transformer movie previous and just change out characters and
You got it.
That's
got it.
Yeah, same plot, different
same
robots.
plot, same save the world, same last minute heroics, same humans taking damage that would kill anybody.
The normal.
Yeah.
mortal.
So, if you guys have been listening to the last few weeks, there was a recent episode where our guys discussed The Chosen. You guys remember that conversation?
I don't.
I remember it vividly.
Remember that, Richard?
Yes.
I have no recollection.
Yeah,
of
you
that.
guys were talking about it. I remember it vividly because I was in my kitchen going, "What in the world? Are you kidding me?
I leave those guys alone for 1 hour. And this is what happens.
How did they let Richard go through a 3-hour treatise on the Mormon church? What's that all about?"
It was. You should have said. It looked like this. He had a book in his hand, and we're like, "Oh my gosh, really?"
You guys let him get away with
We
it
did.
too.
That was
I'd have
part
been
of,
like, "Richard, shut up.
That's-
Nobody cares."
that was my prenuptial. That was my prenuptial agreement. I said, "Hey, I will do the podcast, but I get
I get
6
27
minutes of-
minutes to do this.
soliloquy time to."
Yeah.
Wow,
Well,
soliloquy
that's when
time.
Ken and I went to the bathroom, so it was okay.
Yeah. No, but it was good. You guys had some good conversation. I like the fact that that Ken and Greg were kind of taking the opposite position on that. And
Whoa! I was neutral.
Ah,
I don't agree with that. You were not neutral. No,
Okay.
you were fully in support of.
I've never even seen The Chosen. I think I saw a couple episodes of the first season.
Well, I mean, maybe you thought that you were being neutral, but it didn't come across that way.
anytime I get a chance to, slam Richard, I certainly will take
don't
it.
miss it.
Yeah,
Don't miss it.
It was kind of 2v1.
Yes,
Really?
it was.
Okay.
Which almost even.
I'm sorry.
It was pretty close to even. You should have brought more people. Nah, he did good defending his position. There was one thing that I did agree on. I mean, I didn't agree with most of what he was saying, but I did agree with the idea that there probably should have been more to disclaim the fact that they're not trying to portray the biblical Jesus, that this is just an adaptation of a true story. They did do that at the beginning. Ken did verify that. That I didn't know that. I don't remember them doing that. I did watch the first season. I don't remember that statement being made, but he did look it up, and they did state that this is just an adaptation from true events. And so, props to them for doing that. It would have been probably a good idea to do it every episode, though, because if you came in later, you might be, and I see where your point, if you were a young Christian and you see this movie, you might look at that and take that as gospel. And is that potentially harmful? I think was the question.
I think one of the other things too is you said a young Christian. Unfortunately, you don't have to be a young Christian. I think a lot of people sitting in our churches today are looking at that going, hey, this can replace my Bible reading.
That's a possibility. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some dangers involved in taking entertainment for more than it is. But that being said, I'm not sure that you can get onto the. I'm not sure I can get on board with the argument that it's necessarily evil because LDS people were on the board or on the or they own the production, company that they utilize their equipment or whatever, right? Because I'm not sure that you could ever create Christian content without having some involvement with the world. Or with other people.
Yeah, there was one movie, I think it was called Mark, and they did the book of Mark verbatim. It was quite interesting.
It would be a very boring movie.
It was very boring.
Yeah,
they did their best to create some activities and stuff.
Here's the thing: if you were to just do a movie of the Gospels verbatim, it would be a very terrible movie. You would not understand it. It would be all over the place. It would be boring, except for like a few like really big highlights, but you wouldn't really be able, because the highlights would come and go so fast. Well, that if you didn't really know what was going on, you would have no context to build it on.
Yeah, it was not necessarily for evangelistic purposes, but it was very interesting for a believer. To see that. I
mean, that's an interesting way to do that.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that that's what they were trying to achieve with The Chosen. I think it was a dramatic reinvention of the life of Christ. I don't think they intended it to be the gospel, but I can totally see that if you don't put something at the front end to say, look, guys, this is not Scripture. This is our interpretation dramatically of what it would have been like to be Christ.
Right. And I think my other frustration with it is that there have been chances for the producers, when these issues come up, to really hit a home run in terms of, hey, pride flag, and they come up and say, hey, look, we're Christians, we believe in this, we do not support that community, we support the biblical viewpoint, right? Because that, to me, that's a home run. But what do? They do this lukewarm.
Yeah.
And that's my frustration, is you're a leader, you got to take a bold stance. And so that's, to me, my biggest frustration.
They do kind of like dance around the issue a little bit. It's not like they address it like, I'm not saying that I know what I'm doing, but if it were me and I was in his position, I was Dale Jenkins, and I had to make a statement, I would state something to the effect of, look, guys, we all know that homosexuality is a sin.
Right.
We all know that whole kind of genre of life, that whole kind of archetype of person is sinful to God. That being said, that guy owns his own equipment. He can put whatever he wants to in his own equipment.
100%.
And if he is a sinner, what better place would there be for him to be than surrounded by believers?
Yep.
Agreed.
That's what he should have said.
Agreed. That's a home run.
If he had said that, man, people would have just been like, "Oh man, Chosen, the most amazing thing ever."
Right, but what does he do? He does the lukewarm Laodicean. Here's something that I just saw this morning, and this segues in my mind perfectly to it. Jim Caviezel, huge fan, outspoken Christian. Love his work, Passion Christ. I mean, as I understand it, I'm not a real Hollywood guy, but my understanding is his Christian stance.
Person of Interest. That was a Christian show.
I haven't seen that, but my understanding is that his Christian
it wasn't
stance,
a Christian show, but it was a good show.
Has caused him not to get cast now a lot because he's been so outspoken.
Yeah.
You see his latest movie that's coming out?
Yeah, the one about the trafficking. He quits his job to go save kids from trafficking.
But who does he play?
Oh, I don't know.
He plays Tim Ballard. Who is Tim
Really?
Ballard?
Yeah.
Tim Ballard is the outspoken LDS leader of the Operation Underground Railroad.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
He's LDS?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So now here again, I'm like, if you're going to do that, but to your point, Jim Caviezel, he's played unbelievers. I'm not saying that as an actor there should be an expectation that, oh, I can't play this guy. I only play, but
Yeah, because that's what Hollywood is doing right now.
right.
Yeah.
But you should, if you are a mature Christian, recognize. Back to my soliloquy, I won't go in it, but Mormonism's main drive is to convince the layperson, the unknown, that we are just another branch, another denomination of Christianity. Jim Caviezel should know this, and he should tweet something, however it works, and say, look, I'm playing this character, but I want you to know that I am not in agreement with LDS. I am a biblical Christian and adhere to the Bible.
Yeah, he may not know, though.
Well, he's
How
Catholic.
can you not know?
I mean,
Caviezel's Catholic.
Is he Catholic?
Yes.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Okay.
My
I didn't
understanding.
know that.
There you go, then.
Let's check.
Yeah.
What?
Well, then I'm way out the
religion
base then.
Is Jim?
That'll make things a little different, doesn't it?
You totally destroyed my point, Greg.
Sorry. Caviezel is a devout Catholic.
Well, there you go.
In a 2017 interview, Caviezel talked about the importance of the Catholic faith, the lasting impact the Passion of the Christ has had on his life, which makes sense because the Passion of the Christ is basically the Stations of the Cross
Right.
put to movie.
Yeah. I know the one thing that he said is that he won't do any explicit sexual scenes. So you won't see that in any of his movies.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I think that you can get so worried about that sin that you overlook other things, though, like what Richard's talking about. You know,
Exactly.
I mean, like, and I think it probably falls to us as pastors to put out the warning for people to say, hey, look, guys, you know, this might be a pretty good movie, but bear in mind that the LDS is a cult, guys.
Right.
They don't serve the same Jesus that we serve. My garbage man's going to freak out. Because my garbage man, who is my neighbor.
Who was man of the year in Athol last year.
Who is a really great guy. He is LDS. And we have not had this debate because I like to keep the peace between my neighbors.
Oh man, garbage can be everywhere.
But yeah, I mean, he also says to me sometimes that, you know, well, we're all serve the same Jesus, we all serve the same God, and I'm just thinking to myself, no, your Jesus is way different than my Jesus. Yeah, your Jesus is the brother of Satan.
Yeah.
That's not mine.
Yeah.
You know, your Jesus is he attained godhood.
Right.
He wasn't God before time.
And I didn't realize when I had a conversation with LDS, I went to their own website, and I didn't realize this point, but, you know, they don't believe in the Trinity. They believe in they are three gods united in one purpose.
Yep, three gods, one
I'm
purpose.
like, right there, we're different. We can't be the same. I mean, it's on your own website. There's no argument.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that's being perpetuated by the LDS Church right now. I tell you one place where the LDS Church is really getting some headway and making a lot of their doctrine normalized is in Instagram. What do you call them?
Post?
No. The people, the influencers, Instagram influencers. They have these women that have Instagram influencer accounts, and they do like house decorating. They talk about fashion and makeup, and, you know, all their houses are like pristine with like they're all decorated all the same way. And then you find out, you know, as they're having their conversation with you about their house and stuff, oh, by the way, I'm LDS.
Right.
And this is what we think, you know, and it's very clever.
Yeah.
Actually. And I'm wondering how much they support those influencers to get them started. Because they have massive platforms. Some of the most famous Instagram influencers that do like home decor and stuff like that, they're LDS.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. So they're really pushing, like to your point, they're really pushing themselves out there to normalize it, particularly to Christians.
Right.
You know, it's like, okay, well, it's no big deal. Well, it is kind of a big deal because you don't serve the same God that we do. Yeah. It's a different thing, you know, and and we can coexist, right?
Oh,
but
absolutely.
we can't worship together because we don't worship the same God.
But they're always been out there.
Mhm.
You know, the Mormons, they've always pushed their religion. They've always pushed their
True,
way
but
of life.
I think if you look at history, there have been times where they themselves have said we are not Christian, but now they're back into an era where they're saying no.
Well, and they don't have
We
the
are
history
We're
we have
Christian
either.
just like you're Christian.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's that?
They don't have much history compared to Christianity.
Agreed, but they also
They are
But-
influencing.
But more to the point, like this is kind of like something that's happening with a lot of different like faiths, so to speak. You know, they all say, and it kind of reminds me of Scripture when it says that many will come in my name, in the last days many will come in my name. And you know, I mean, I'm probably going to make a lot of people mad at me, but the Roman Catholic Church is a great example of this.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, the Catholic Church, there's nothing there's I shouldn't say there's nothing. There's not a lot that's biblical about the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church,
Well,
or the Church of England, or
papacy-
Orthodox Christianity.
the
that
papacy in
matter.
itself
Is
goes
unbiblical,
flies right into
Yeah.
the face of
And so, you know, the problem that I have with all of this is the lumping together of Christianity
with all
into
these
this kind
religions.
of like religious soup,
conglomerate.
more or less. You know, it's like, well, Roman Catholics are the same as Christians, are the same as Jehovah's Witness, are the same as LDS, are the same as Universalism.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we're all after the same God. We're just getting there in different
Yeah.
ways, kind of like in the famous words of Oprah Winfrey, that, you know, prophet of old. You know, it's like, no, actually, the Bible's pretty clear that Jesus Christ is the only way
I am
to
the
God.
way, the
I am the
truth,
way,
and
the
the
truth,
life.
and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me.
Mhm.
And so, if there is another pathway that is given, then that's not Christian.
No, that's
I'm
LDS.
sorry, it's something else, and you're free to be that. And I would love to, you know, debate with you about your beliefs and your philosophies. I'd love to find out what brought you to that belief structure and your story and what brought you into. Like, I would love to have an interview with a Satanist. I mean, if they're out there, please come. Let us
Yeah.
sit down and talk, because I'd love to get your story and
Yeah.
figure out why it is. How did you get to the place where you are?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you how I got to the place where I am.
And we will
then-
be loving and cordial in
for
that
sure.
process.
Yeah, I mean, we're not trying to get anybody.
No.
You know, we just want
We
to
want to understand.
sit down in the bar and have a conversation.
Yeah,
you
that's
know.
right.
And I'm actually funny, so
Yeah, that's debatable. That's debatable. I don't know about
I'm
all
sorry,
that.
what did he say?
He said he's actually funny.
Well, Richard, I think you're funny.
Yeah. So, anyways,
Make me laugh.
that whole public condemnation thing for the Chosen came up after after that pride flag appeared. There's two pieces to that. The first one is like what you were talking about. He should have made a home run statement there. He could have made a home run
could've.
statement, but he chose not to, which is disturbing.
yeah.
And then the other side of that is people's just knee-jerk reaction to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they saw a pride flag and then instantly hatred, anger, mean tweets, upsetting tweets. You know, it's like, we got to react. Pride flag must react. Pride flag must react.
Right,
you know, it's
right.
like we've gotten into this place where it's like any time that a pride flag is shown or there's support for the LGBTQ community, which I don't believe in, but anytime that there's any support shown, Christians just freak out. They're like, pride flag, blah, 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 boycott, boycott, blah, 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 blah. And it's like it's become programmed at this point. And my question is where was the ire for sin before that? You know, I mean, it's like all of a sudden now we've got a sin that is offensive to our sensibilities, and so now we're freaking out about it. Well, fair enough. You know, where was the ire for sin before the LGBTQ community was popular?
Right.
Because there was plenty of sin to be had. You know, and nobody was freaking out about that. Nobody was freaking out about the support for different groups that were vile and disgusting before LGBTQ came along.
So, can I dovetail on that?
Yeah.
real quick?
Yeah.
See, John.
Yeah,
So
please.
I
Make it funny.
It better be funny because you said that you're funny.
So, you know, y'all kind of know how I feel on alcohol. I'm not a fan of it.
Mhm.
Definitely my law enforcement experience made me really less a fan of it. And to your point, Chris, I've never thought about this, but it makes me realize, like, yeah, where did we lose our fervor? I mean, everybody's championing Bud Light going down because of the pride support. Like, why aren't we championing like all of alcohol as a general sense? Beer. Do you know how many women get raped? Do you know how many people make life-altering, stupid decisions because of the beer industry?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why have we waited?
Nobody was upset about it before.
Yeah,
yeah.
But now the pride, like, it's the whole industry is iniquitous. The whole industry ruins people's lives.
Well, and I'll tell you why, because a lot of Christians are probably like I am. I might have 2 beers a week, maybe.
Yeah. And I realize I'm only extreme in that.
And I'm not saying that you're wrong.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that, if you're going to view something through the lens of what is biblical, and then you're going to start being angry about it, then there's a lot of reasons to be angry at alcohol before the LGBTQ community came along.
Right.
And boycott it for what it does.
Chris,
smoking and Target and Walmart and all these stores, there was plenty to be angry about before they came along.
Don't you think we, Athol Baptist Church, have been on that front line to say sin is sin, doesn't matter what form it takes, and we preach against it, we teach against it.
Oh, sure.
We stand against it.
Sure.
But church as a whole, church quote-unquote universal, is not accepting that, is not embracing that. Because here's what came to mind when we talked about this pride flag on this cameraman's camera, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he borrowed the camera. I don't know. Maybe it's not his. What about the next cameraman? I know they got more than one camera on that job. Are they have sin. Maybe they're an adulterer. Maybe they're an alcoholic. We don't know that. This one guy just decides he labeled himself.
Well, that's the difference between them and the pride flag.
Exactly.
The pride flag is exactly what it is. We have sin and we're prideful of it.
Yes.
And that's
unrepentant sin.
That's what burns people's chaps about it.
Right.
It's no longer that we have to hide it. And in reality, in the United States of America, why should you have to hide your sin?
Mm-hmm.
If we believe in freedom, then we should believe that people can perform immorality and have the freedom to do that. That's what really people are struggling with. I think it's more of an internal struggle than it is an external struggle, and the external struggle is just a manifestation of the struggle that we're dealing with internally.
Well, yeah. It's always been that way.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, are you kind of saying we need to be careful that when we see the pride flag, we don't start this programmed response that would lead a slippery slope to hatred, instead of seeing the pride flag and saying, okay, here's an opportunity.
Here's an opportunity
open dialogue
to have an open dialogue with someone about their sin and to express to them the Savior that is the solution for their sin.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. It's like and that's kind of what I was pointing out in my sermon yesterday as well. It's like we have gotten to this point where conflict is the goal. That's the goal, to have conflict and debate and to tell people that they're wrong. And that's completely the opposite of what Christ told us to be.
Right.
He told us to be peacemakers and to create peace and an atmosphere where the gospel can flourish.
Right.
And if we're going to be that, then what we should have done, instead of gathering around this guy with a pride flag on his camera and making fun of him and beating him down like the world might do, people that are kind of that bent of a secular nature, what we should have done, we should have surrounded this guy and said, hey, look, we're not going to make fun of this guy, but we are going to pray for you, and we'd love to have a conversation with you. If I were Dale Jenkins, I would have walked up to that guy and hugged him and said, I'm sorry for the way that my people have reacted to you.
Maybe he did.
And hopefully he did. Yeah. I don't know. I just don't think that there's any room in Scripture for us to behave the way that we do when we respond to people who are doing what they are naturally inclined to do. It's like when people sin in this world, Christians are surprised or something.
Agreed, but we also have to ensure that we stand boldly on the truth regardless of the consequences. And that's, to me, what Mr. Jenkins is not doing.
But it's not truth and love.
Correct.
It's not truth and love. It's truth and anger and conflict and hatred.
Right.
And there's a big difference.
Oh, for sure. But I think you could still frame that in the sense of like you're saying, you can lead off with like, hey, that's done. I can't even control it, but we love these people, and we are doing this show because we're trying to present we support biblical Christianity. We
Right.
don't like it. Could obviously you can't do it in one pithy one sentence thing.
He definitely could have done a better job.
Right.
At
but it's not the
recovering
first
from
time.
that.
I mean, he did the same mistake with what was the other issue they had?
It's possible
The
that
LDS
it's possible that he's terrible at PR.
right.
I mean, that's a distinct possibility.
Yeah.
He could just be really terrible at PR.
Yeah.
They
no.
probably need a PR person to come in and say, "Hey, look, you just stop.
Yeah.
Don't say anything anymore. You just produce movies, direct movies. We will talk to the public.
Write books.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, I
So,
mean, that's a
Dale,
possibility.
when you listen to this, give us a call, and we'll get you on the show, and we can discuss this.
Yeah. I'm
Well,
sure
further.
he's gonna listen.
if we can get him in, you know, with past all the Joe Rogan comments, because he comments a lot on our show. You know, I mean, he listens every day. You know,
it's a
Joe
Oh,
Rogan
Joe
does.
Rogan, yeah.
Pastor Ken. We're gonna put that in your lap. Get a
I'm
hold
pretty
of
sure
those
they're on the
guys.
queue. Joe Rogan, Dallas Jenkins.
You know,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it kind of tells a story though about how Christians do engage with entertainment, because it's not as black and white as some would like to believe.
Mhm.
In either direction. You know, you do have people that are on the far end of that. That's like anything produced that is not about the Bible is definitely evil. And then on the other side of that, you have Christians who are like, okay, no holds barred. I can watch whatever I want. Like, I'll never forget, you know, Russell Wilson, who's was the quarterback for Seattle. He's now quarterback for the Broncos.
Right.
He was a pretty outspoken Christian. And he came in one day and on Twitter and was talking about how he watched 50 Shades of Grey, you know, and was like, it was a pretty decent movie. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, that's not really the type of movie that a Christian should be watching.
Mm-hmm.
But, and then in thinking about it even more, I was like, well, in reality, him watching a movie about that sin is really no different than me watching a movie about any other sin.
All right.
So who am I to judge?
Yeah, that good point. Should we, as pastors, be watching these first-run movies in order to better decipher what's going on for the congregation?
I think that it's probably a good idea to be looking at what our congregation is looking at with a judging eye, to be able to speak to what was true and what was false in it.
We have to be very strong.
I think that you have to be pretty mature to be able to walk into that,
Yes.
but I think there's value in that. Now, I know some pastors would say that, no, we shouldn't be entertaining that because it doesn't matter what's in it. We know that it's sin. It's like, well, do you know?
You're taking
because
somebody else's opinion of that.
you haven't seen it, so you actually have no idea what's in it. It's like, well, I read some articles about it. Well, it's like, okay, well, you know, I can read an article. I could read 5 articles on the internet about one topic and get 5 different conclusions.
Yeah.
So
let's go to The Shack real quick.
The
never,
Shack,
Never seen it.
that was
but
a horribly sacrilegious movie.
There you go.
Yeah,
Do I need to watch that, or you've seen it?
as I've seen it.
Okay, so I can lean on your opinion on that.
I think
I know God is a woman. God is a black woman.
Well, it's not even just that. It's just the portrayal of God as 3 separate persons, I think, is
Right.
probably approaching the idea of like an LDS type of God.
Okay.
But it was way more metaphysical than it was biblical.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it really leaned heavily on kind of like Eastern philosophy when it came to like concepts of love and peace and understanding and
So
things of that nature.
I personally only need those bullet points to tell somebody that's asking me, probably not a good movie. Here's why.
Yeah.
I don't need to watch it myself.
Yeah, a little bit of knowledge goes a long way. That being said, though, you just got to be really careful, you know, because people were asking me about Game of Thrones. Well, I watched 3 episodes of Game of Thrones, and I couldn't watch it anymore. It was too pornographic. It was the pornography in Game of Thrones was surprising. It was shocking.
Is that a
probably why it
TV
was so
series
popular.
or a movie?
No, it's a TV series.
TV series. Okay.
And there was a lot of seasons of it. And you know, from what I understand of the plot, the story is amazing. and it's too bad because, you know, as a person who likes fantasy fiction, you know, I probably would have liked to have watched it, but I couldn't get past 3 episodes because just the flagrant nudity and pornography, and I'm talking pornography, like people actually having sex on screen, was abysmal. It was breathtaking. You know, it's like, what in the world is going on here?
Beyond the Song of Solomon.
It was bad. So, you know, that I think that, you know, sometimes being a pastor sometimes means that you have to step into fields that are kind of gross sometimes to be able to walk out and say, no, I'm not leading the sheep in that field.
Yeah. You know,
I think there's wisdom in that. I know pastors who would disagree with me.
Yeah.
But
I remember Jim Dobson one time. He was asked to be on the President's Council for Pornography. It's probably 30, 40 years ago, maybe 30.
That would be an easy job. It's evil. And it's wrong.
Well, it destroyed this one man.
And it kills people.
He asked a fellow pastor, friend of his, if he would be on that council with him, and they had an interview with this pastor, and he said, "I'm ruined." He says, "I've got 2 teenage daughters, and what I saw I had never seen before, and now I have that in my mind." And he says, "I cannot." There's certain things he cannot do
he's
anymore.
never. He got to that point in his life. He's never seen pornography.
Not to the degree that he was watching.
I call bull on that.
Well, you know, possible. I agree with you from the standpoint of men. You know, we've all been exposed to it to one degree or another. But I do know men that say, I don't deal with that.
It could have been something that was so gross and so out in left field that he's like, no, I've never been exposed to that before.
Yes, that would
basically
what he was saying. He says it because the part that hurt me the most was he said, I can't look at my 2 teenage daughters the same way anymore.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, what actually did he see?
There's things that are definitely like dark that you really do have to watch out for, and I think that you have to really be careful about. This might be a good opportunity to bring up Harry Potter because lots of Christians really like Harry Potter. Yeah. Harry Potter is a story about a boy who learns that he's a wizard, and he goes to wizarding school and learns to be a wizard, and he fights against Voldemort, who is a dark wizard who has also learned to cast spells and do incantations and make potions, and you know there's a whole school of it. And I've been to the place where J.K. Rowling wrote that in Edinburgh. There's a little bar, I think it's called the Red Elephant. I may have that wrong, but it's a little pub in Edinburgh that she wrote most of it on, and there's like a graveyard next to it, pretty close to it, that you can walk through, and a lot of the names in the book are on those tombstones. Yeah, McGonagall is in there. There quite a few of them are in there. It's interesting.
I hope those families are getting their royalties from that.
Interesting bit of history, you know, our pop culture references. But that being said, you know, it's like the age-old question, should a Christian be watching that because of the sorcery in it, right? Because the Bible says that sorcery is evil, right? It's like, well, okay.
Yeah.
Does it?
It's in the Bible.
Yeah.
You know, it talks about it. And if you have the question, what is sorcery? You can look it up or you can experience it.
I'm going to ask you the Matt Walsh question. What is a witch?
What is a witch?
Yeah. What is a witch?
Well, let's see. What is a woman?
Wrong movie.
You know, and I agree that there are definitely some unbiblical principles in there. There are definitely some occult principles in there. There are definitely some...
There being Harry Potter?
Harry Potter. Yeah, there's definitely all of that in there. Is the thrust of the movie a design to teach your children to be a part of the occult?
That's a big question in those movies.
No.
All of those.
That you cannot watch those movies and then walk away from it going, wow, I really want to learn the occult now. Because that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is the plot. They don't really the magic is like a side note. That's like lightsabers in Star Wars. It's like that's the plot driver. But the plot is not really about that. The plot is good overcoming evil and self-sacrifice. And actually, the story of Harry Potter is archetypal of Christ in a way, because he sacrifices himself for the good of all people, because that's the only way that Voldemort could be destroyed.
Now, is that why Christians watch it?
And I think that's probably why Christians watch it, because they pick up on the undertones.
The good guy wins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis's work was a lot like that. Aslan was an archetype of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And
Tolkien?
even Lord of the Rings, even though Tolkien said to not allegorize his work, he said it specifically.
Yeah, he did. But it's like, what?
But you can't possibly do it. And the reason is because heroic archetypes are pretty simple. They are the same throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you're Greek or Sumerian or Jewish or Chinese or, whatever. Our heroic archetypes are pretty simple because they all encapsulate very simple heroic ideas. So that's the story. And then everything that goes along with it is just plot devices that drive the story. That's why Harry Potter was so successful. And that's why, by the way, that the new Star Wars movies are not. Because they're not a plot with plot devices to drive a story.
And heroes.
They're plot devices that make a story that drive a plot. And there is no plot that
There's no character.
there's no character development. There's no empowering or learning of a hero's journey. There's nothing like that. And so that's the difference between that and Harry Potter. Harry Potter was 7 or 8 movies, something like that. 8 movies of character development.
Right.
It was 8 movies of Harry Potter learning who he was.
And not just him, but others.
So in that regard, artistically, I would say that it's a decent movie to watch. However, the caveat is that you have to understand as a believer that it has concepts in it that are not biblical, just like most movies that you watch.
And you said something that made me tilt my head a little bit, and that is that most people, and you're right, most people are not going to walk away from that movie going, wow, that was cool. I want to be a witch. I want to be a sorcerer. But there are those that are probably doing that.
Oh, sure.
They're probably walking,
sure.
This would be
but
cool.
But as a Christian, that's probably not going to happen to you. I would be surprised if you could walk out of there with the Holy Spirit thinking that.
Bingo. That's the difference in name only.
But that being said, it shouldn't surprise you that a worldly person walks into something like that and walks out going, I want to be a witch. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, people are going to walk into Transformers and boys are going to walk out of Transformers going, I want to be a robot.
I am Optimus Prime.
That's not a big deal, right? The world walking out of a movie wanting to emulate the archetypes that were in the movie, that's normal human behavior. So we shouldn't be surprised by that. Mm-hmm. But as believers, if we enter into that world, we have to be very careful because there is a possibility that it can consume your life and your thoughts.
Right. Yep. And I'll ask that question because I struggled with this as a new dad when this was coming out. And for me, I read the Harry Potter books. And when the movies came out with the
I didn't read the books because I got irritated with them. J.K. Rowling as an author is way too detailed.
Yeah.
I've heard that.
Aggravated me so much. It's like, can you please let me imagine what this dang rug looks like?
Good with the adjectives.
I don't need to know the thread count of this sheet.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, it's like, okay, can we calm down on the descriptions a little bit?
Right.
I can develop these thoughts in my own head.
Well, I enjoyed the books, but when it came to
because you're a simpleton. So.
Yeah, it is in many ways.
I need this.
Yeah. So as it came time for my kids, that's the age-old question: what do you expose them to? And kind of what the wife and we came to was, exposing them to it because it really, if you pull back the layers, it's all demonic, and I'll define demonic as anything that gives you a picture that salvation is anything other than Christ.
Yeah.
Marvel, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, all of these present salvation in humanity and not through Christ. So they're all demonic.
Yeah.
They're just back to the pride flag, right? It's just not as overt. It doesn't have that tagline to jump onto. So as parents, we were like, hey, and I know there's my favorite pastor I listen to disagrees wholeheartedly with this, but I'm like, well, we're going to watch it, but we use that as an opportunity as parents to say, hey, this is about what we're about to watch. Realize this is not Christian. And it works, we don't do Santa Claus, but we watch Santa Claus movies, but the kids know it's just entertainment. They don't believe in it. For us as parents, it opens the door to have those conversations, because my fear as parents that homeschool and stuff is we're going to raise these kids in a bubble, because they're going out into the most anti-Christian, the most relative morality, the most wicked America that has ever been produced. And I just feel that at some level I've got to expose my kids to give them that ability to start to discern and start to have that ability.
I've seen it go both ways.
Yeah.
Like I've seen kids who were extremely sheltered like that actually go completely off the deep end when they leave out the house and completely turn to alternate lifestyles and Satanism and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I've seen kids that were super sheltered like that come out and be amazing people of God, right? And I've seen the opposite. I've seen kids who were exposed to culture and exposed to music and exposed to movies come out to be terrible human beings.
Right.
And I've seen the opposite. I've seen kids like that come out to be extremely decent human beings. And I think what it boils down to is you can shelter your kids, but you cannot prevent them from becoming the person that they're going to become.
Right.
You can teach them, and I think that's what train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it means. I think what that means is that even when they depart from it, which is a distinct possibility and is probably it's probably the rule as opposed to the exception. But when they depart from it, they won't forget the things that you've taught them.
Right.
Which is why we have, as a family, taken a tack that we're going to be the same way. My kids have been exposed to lots of different culture.
Right.
And I feel like if you are going to be in this world, it doesn't make a lot of sense to not be knowledgeable about the way they think, about the way that they perceive art, about the way that they perceive culture, because ultimately art and culture builds your morality, and morality is always downstream from politics, or politics is always downstream from morality. Sorry. Right. And so it's important to know these things, and I believe that this is just my opinion, but I think that not exposing your kids to some sort of knowledge about what's going on in the world without the and giving them the education like what you're talking about.
Right.
We have these conversations too.
That's my question about should we go out and watch these movies that we know going in are.
I think it's unwise to
kids.
not know what the enemy is doing.
But can I answer that? I think there's some nuance to that as well, though. And let me use my experience with the state police. When I started working with the Internet Crimes Against Children, which is the prosecution of child pornography, one of the ugly aspects of trying to prosecute child pornography is a literal person has got to look at the images, the videos to verify that it's actual child pornography. So you have a human that has to, a law enforcement officer at some level has got to watch some. Now, say you get a phone and it's got 7,000 images. Doesn't have to go through 7,000 images, but he's got to verify the at some level that it's there. That makes sense.
Oh yeah.
So as I got into it with Lee, I told Lee straight up, I'm like, I can't do this. This will ruin my life. I'm like,
it's my story about
exactly.
the
So
guy.
my point was, I don't have the headspace to be able to handle that. I cannot do it now. My partner,
it's not for everyone.
Now my partner was able to do it and seemingly was able to not affect his life, and which is great because we need that people. So back to the pastors, right? I think you have to have that calling because that's the wisdom, right? You have to know yourself. And if you watch a 50 Shades of Grey, if you watch a Harry Potter, and it lessens your walk, you've got to have the discernment to say,
be able to walk away.
I can't do this. And so for pastors, like if we're pastors and it's like, hey, Rich, we need you to come on board and you need to watch all these Showtime explicit like movies to see if I'm like, I can't do that.
Nah.
I can't do
Porn night at 3 p.m.
Yeah, I cannot do that, right?
Yeah.
you got to have that right. So I'm saying the pastor would need to be called. There would also need to be a need, right? I don't know that
there was.
Yeah, but I mean, let's not be mistaken. Okay, so what we're talking about is we're talking about theater. We're talking about people going into a production with a plot to generate theater.
No, agreed.
That's not what child pornography is, and that's not what pornography is. Those are two different animals. Let's not elevate pornography.
My point to the extreme was
the level of art.
My point to the extreme was that anything that you consume that mentally goes into you can affect you. So if you're watching, say, like, what are some real dark movies where just dark stuff happens?
Exorcist would be one.
I'm trying to think of something. Just like where people are just
What about like the reality based movies, like found footage movies, like Blair Witch Project?
Oh yeah,
you know, I find those to be hilarious and dumb, but they do deal with very dark parts of human nature.
Yeah, horror type movies, right? Like I can't watch horror movies. Like I don't like to. I'm in the woods and stuff, and I just don't. So I wouldn't be the guy, like, if you're like, hey, Rich, we need you to review these horror movies. Like, I know Ken wants to do the nefarious or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a difference between, a person, like, say, a pastor looking at things that are popular culture and a pastor just reviewing horror movies for the sake of reviewing horror movies. I think there's a big difference between that.
No, for sure.
I mean, there's a big difference between a guy sitting down and watching the, say, for instance, Fellowship of the Ring series, and sitting down at your computer and reviewing 30 minutes of pornography. Yeah. I mean, there's a huge difference between those two things, and it's not easily quantifiable with words, but if you put those things next to each other, you can tell that there's a distinct difference between those two things, right?
But we ourselves, in this conversation, have said certain movies are pornographic.
Yeah,
in nature.
But see, you wouldn't know that. But see, here's the thing, like with Game of Thrones, right? 3 episodes in, I was like, no, I can't do this anymore. Mm-hmm. I had to walk away because, I mean, I could have watched the entire series and still been saved. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't have watched the entire series and had the same fellowship with God that I have right now. There was a deep conviction that, okay, we have to be done with this.
Can't do it.
When we've seen it, we're done. We're moving on, because I'm assuming that the rest of the show is the same as the first part of the show.
So what you're separating, this is pornography. This is those are TV show or a movie.
Those are two different animals.
Pornographic.
Those are two different animals.
I agree.
And a lot of people, one of the things that I think is beneficial about knowing what is Game of Thrones is really all about is because people will defend that as high art. Which, in my estimation, pornographic sex is not high art. Mm-hmm. I don't care who you are. You might assume that it is, and you might have that feeling, but I can definitely disagree with you that pornographic activity is not high art. You can say it is, but it is not mainstream, not by any stretch of the imagination.
And that's Game of Thrones. That's a real people. It's not a cartoon, right?
No, it's real people.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, full frontal nudity, lots of lasciviousness. It's just in 3 episodes. I'm saying
the name of that again?
I'm saying in 3 episodes, it was completely vile. To the point where I just was like, okay, I can't stomach this anymore. This is just beyond the scope. Like, I can handle violence for a long period of time, which is a problem in and of itself. I can handle a lot of things. I can even handle cursing, particularly in military movies. Like, it seems more realistic to me if there's a lot of cursing in military movies, because if you've known any military people, cursing is pretty much all they do.
Yeah.
So, I can even tolerate a lot of that, but just gratuitous pornographic sex, I just can't. I can't find any value in it at all.
Can I ask your opinion real quick, both of you? When you hear a GD in a movie,
okay,
do you believe that person is asking God to damn whatever the person, the thing, the situation?
I don't
is?
even equate that to my God.
Consciously? No, I think they're just.
I think it's just a worldly person cursing is what I think. It doesn't do anything for me. I don't believe that me listening to that is honoring them taking the Lord's name in vain because they have no concept of the God that I worship.
Yeah.
They're just, that could be anybody. That could be Buddha. That could be, any one of 1,000 Hindu gods. It's a very generalized term. It's not like they're saying, Jehovah or Yahweh or, it's not very specific.
But I'm still sensitive. Me personally, I agree with what he's saying, but I'm still sensitive to it. I hear it and I wince. I just
me too.
That's
Me
one
too.
of the words.
That's why I'm like, ugh.
I don't view it the same. When I look at people that are in the world, nothing surprises me.
Right.
Nothing surprises me. They can do anything, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, that's a lost person.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's what they do. And I don't know if that's healthy or not. But that's just kind of the way that I perceive it. And so when I see a guy on a television screen and he uses the GD terminology, it's just a curse word to me.
You can't get away from it today. I mean, if you got to go.
I don't
almost PG. I
maybe.
think PG. One of the rules is you can do one GD or maybe two.
I'm not
GDs.
as sensitive to it as you are, so I don't hear it as much. I do get annoyed with the gratuitous use of the F word.
Yeah.
And it's not that I get offended. It's just
like,
can you come up with another word?
Find another word.
I mean, the dictionary is massive.
A wonderful language. Yes.
It's like we don't need to reduce like a third of our script to the F word.
Yeah.
Let's be more creative than that.
I was
that annoys me.
Sitting next to someone that is not a Christian, somewhat worldly, and this was many moons ago, watching 48 Hours, and we were 15 minutes into it, and this person looks over at me and goes, well, they've worn that word out, and I don't know how many times they use the F word in 48 Hours in the first 15 minutes, but it was
Good Will Hunting.
Over the top.
Good Will Hunting.
Is that the same way?
Amazing movie, but Matt Damon.
Matt Damon.
And I think it's Robin Williams is
Robin
in that?
Williams, yeah.
They use the F word so much. It's like every third word.
Yeah.
And it's just like, how can you enjoy a plot when there's no other language in it?
Yeah.
It's like
and it wasn't a war movie.
There's no language to build context. Even military movies, like what was the one where they were in Benghazi?
13 Hours?
That had John Krasinski in it.
I haven't seen it, but
that's an amazing movie. There's a lot of cursing in it, but it's not gratuitous. It's like it's well placed in the places where military guys would use it. And it makes a lot of sense. But like we just watched a movie about Michael Jordan, and Matt Damon is in it, and it's about his
the tennis
Air.
shoes.
I forget what it's called.
it's going to call it Air.
Yeah, something like that. And really good movie, but the gratuitous use of the F word was so obnoxious and so out of place.
Yeah.
That it just didn't make any sense. And that to me is irritating. That's just using it to use it.
Yeah.
But that's like normal. Like I can remember going over to Scotland, and Joel and I were riding a bus going to Glasgow because we were going to go visit Glasgow and walk around, and that was a fun trip. That was a hilarious trip. But anyway, if you can imagine Joel and I
I can.
by ourselves walking about town.
Yeah, it's dangerous to
Yeah,
even think
that
way.
So anyways, we were going, I can't remember if we were going to Glasgow or coming from Glasgow, but we were sitting next to a guy, and this guy was talking to Joel, and Joel was telling him about what he did and everything, and like every third word out of this guy's mouth was F, right? And so he asked me, he's like, well, what do you do? And I says, well, I'm a pastor at a church. And he's like, well, you don't look like an effing pastor, you know? And
no effect.
And it was just like no phase. It didn't even phase him. Like that was totally normal. You know? That's just the way the world is.
Yeah.
And I think we're worse off for it. You know, if you want to talk, you know,
it numbs
intellectually.
us.
It's not only that. It's just, it's easy. It's easy to replace any word with F and then, you know, think, oh, well, this is culturally awesome. It's like, okay, well, you know, let's be a little bit more refined in our language than that. You know, we've become really ignorant as a culture. We really have.
I was in high-tech business for 17 years, and you early 70s, mid-70s, mid-80s, you did not hear that kind of language in the boardroom, in staff meetings. And then it very quickly, within 5 years, not only did you hear it out of the mouths of people, but you heard it out of the mouths of women.
Yeah.
And that shocked me. That I knew we were making a turn for the worse.
Well, you know, coming out of when you grew up in the 20s, it was a lot different.
It's the 30s, Chris.
Well, I think the positive to this is, you know, you said it earlier, Chris, is that with our kids, like, you know, just to watch a Marvel movie, right? Just to watch a superhero movie, they're going to be using this kind of language. And what we're trying to tell our kids is like, look, you've got to make the choice to either sound uneducated or make the choice to use a language. And then how refreshing it is. I mean, like you're saying, imagine meeting someone who uses actual loquacious language and uses like beautiful mastery of words. It'd be like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
I mean, I picked up who's this guy who wrote Rip Van Winkle? He also wrote The Headless Horseman. Anyway, in the 1800s was when he wrote this book, and you read it and you're just blown away by his vocabulary. Mm-hmm. It's just wow! It's so impressive. Like we think we've
Washington Irving.
We think we've progressed so far, and you go read people that wrote in the 1800s and the early 1900s. You're like their vocabulary and language was
sermons
just,
as well.
Yeah,
Read Spurgeon.
Oh
yeah,
and then read
Amazing.
like a popular sermon from today.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to name any names because
name
we'll all be embarrassed. But
Yeah.
you know, or Chris Antone. There's a good one to follow. You know, him compared to Spurgeon. Spurgeon.
It's almost poetic.
It is poetic, and there's no wasted words, and every word is important and well thought
and
out.
I have to look up every third one.
And you know, we have just become so ignorant of the culture because of that. Yeah. But there's also another danger to not being aware of what popular culture is coming out with. And I've made this comment before, and you know, maybe it's a little bit crazy, but I think that this holds true. So every culture that has ever existed has created a mythology. Who I don't care who you are, whatever culture, mythology, and that mythology sometimes turns out to be religious. Most of the time, it turns out to be religious. Mm-hmm. So, like with the Greeks, you had monotheism, or no, not polytheism. Yep. You had all the different gods. Hinduism, you had that. They have their own. Like if you look at like Hinduism, they have like thousands of gods, and they view their gods like comic book characters. Like they have heroic stories. They have all these different things that are going on. America is no different. The United States of America has created its own mythology, and that mythology is based around a lot, in large part, by these fantasy stories and comic books.
Sure.
Marvel, DC,
Marvel in general.
They are the mythology that America created.
Mm-hmm.
And they draw a lot from other mythologies, but every American knows who Superman is.
Right.
In fact, most people in the world know who Superman is. Superman is a completely American idea. He is a completely American hero.
Yeah. And folks,
he's patriotic.
He's not real.
He's patriotic. He is powerful. He's kind. He is the archetype of the ideal American heroic identity. To not know that is a mistake. He is not God, obviously. But to a lot of American children, he is. And he is their hero.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
along with
I think
all the other Marvel characters.
I think one thing that if you want to give any credit at all to The Chosen, you could give them this. They have made Jesus heroic again, in a degree. We have failed as believers to make Jesus heroic. He is not typically presented in sermons or in teaching or in anything else as a heroic character. He's always presented as the Savior of the world. He's always presented as the Son of God. He's always, but he's never presented in a hero's story. It's always a sacrificial story, which, if you really think about it, the sacrificial story is a heroic story. What's a shame is that Harry Potter did better at telling the story of Christ than Christians have done telling the story of Christ.
There's a whole episode
Think
right
about
there.
that. Think about that for a second, because they really built up who he was to the point where he had to sacrifice himself to save the world from the evil entity that was trying to destroy it. Those are all the same exact archetypes, allegorically, as Christianity.
On an entertainment level, I would agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, we have taught who Christ is, and we have taught academically who Christ is, but we have not really given our kids the opportunity to embrace Christ as their hero.
How do we do that?
That's a great question. You can't do it without telling the story in a heroic way. You can't. It's not possible. You can't take Scripture and give it to a kid and say, "Here's Jesus. Isn't he heroic?" Right? That's not what Scripture is designed to do.
Right.
You have to take artistic license with it to do that, and that's the problem. It's like when because it borders on being irreverent. It borders on telling a story that is not true. There's a lot of difficulties that arise from that.
Are we borderline blasphemy?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think blasphemy is a pretty strong word for that.
It is. I don't even want to get near it.
I don't. In fact, I don't even know if that's even a thing. Right? You can. Blasphemy is. I'm not even sure how you would define it. You can do blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, but if you are saved,
it's rejection.
You can't blaspheme God. Right. That's not possible because you belong to Him. You might say those words, but it's not like, you might say that I hate God, right? But that's not really what your soul is saying, because your soul is perfect if you are created if you were born again. So that's just your flesh speaking, which is going to be burnt up anyways. And so that's a tough word to present to anything. I don't think that any Christians are intentionally trying to be blasphemous when they create Christian art. I think that they are trying to portray in their minds what they envision the life of Christ being like. And I think everybody's a little bit different when they envision that.
Trying to make Jesus Christ a hero. How do you do that?
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things you reinforce, it's easy with kids, right? You reinforce the fact that, let's take Santa Claus. Santa Claus ain't the one that brought you those gifts. Christ is the one who gave me a job, who allowed your mother and I to know you to get it. Like, Christ is a hero. And I think it's a constant reminder. And when good things happen, when character building happens, it's because Jesus has done it. And I think it's that you continue to reinforce with your children, at least.
That makes
He's
him
the hero. He's the one making this
Yeah,
happen.
I think you can do that, and I think that that's probably good, but I think if you're not telling the story.
Agreed. Obviously, that's not.
Then you're not
without the story, for sure.
You have to tell the story. And I wish that I would have done this. And thinking about this now, I wish that I would have done this more with my kids. Instead of sitting down and reading the Bible, sit down and tell them the story of Jesus, and tell them what the Bible says that Jesus did. And so I think in that regard, there is room for Christian art to do that.
Well, that's why I got the boys the manga Bible, or the
manga Bible.
Yeah, because it presents it in like a comic book, like heroic type.
Really, manga
genre. Like it's a comic book. It's the Bible, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Never heard of it.
And they've done that before.
Yeah.
But as is usually the case when you have something that is Christian that's created to portray Christ that way, Christians reject it out of hand because it's of Christ. And that kind of Ken asked this question on the script. He said, do viewers give more grace to films about ordinary Christians than they do films about Christ himself? The answer to that question is yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
As a whole.
Absolutely
yes.
they do. I would say that most Christians do. And I think that the knee-jerk reaction to the pride flag is evidence of that. Had that been a Christian movie like Left Behind, or like a movie Woodlawn, right, about nobody would have said anything, or it wouldn't even have been news, really. But I think because it is about Christ, it's made to be news, and I don't think it's a mistake that got leaked out the way that it did.
Right.
Perhaps that person has an axe to grind. Or if he did put it up and they put it back down, people who actually got the video and then produced it had an axe to grind. I think that in my viewing of the first two first seasons of The Chosen, I had an admiration for the way that they portrayed Christ. I think that they did an excellent job of finally portraying Christ as not only God in the flesh, but as human. One of the most endearing scenes in that whole series was Jesus, before he started his public ministry, is out on the roadside and he's just camping. And this is all completely taken out of, this is all licensed. There's all artistic license. There's nothing to say that Christ was like this. But he had his lean-to up where he had set up his place where he was sleeping. He had a fire going. He had some clay pots that he was making his dinner in, and he was making dinner and making, whatever it was, and he was pouring in the dishes, and he was, and I was thinking to myself, nobody ever thinks about the fact that Christ did these things.
Mm-hmm.
He camped on the side of the road, and he made dinner. And it shows him, like, all this spare time that he had, like after dinner before he goes to bed. You think about Christ because the Bible is so concise in the way that it presents him, like he was just always busy. But that's just not the case. There were hours where he was just killing time.
Right.
What was he doing, right? And so they portrayed him because he had this background with his dad who was a carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
He was making these children's toys out of wood, just sitting in his bed, just kind of making them. And then he would take them into town and he would give them to kids or sell them. And this kid comes along and sees what he's doing, and he has a conversation with this kid, and he gives the kid these toys, and and
So what do
and it's just like this relationship that it showed this child having with Jesus that was completely not scriptural, but really demonstrated, wow, that's not a bad way to be,
So we got 18 years, right? From 12, when he's 12 at the temple.
Oh, you
until
got
30.
Yeah, there's a lot of time that you have no idea.
Yeah, we have
a lot more
no
than that.
clue.
You don't know much about his youth at all.
Yeah.
See, and I guess for me, I'm going to mildly disagree with you in the sense that, for me at least, and I'm okay when it comes to stuff that doesn't deal with, and this, I guess,
every stinking time. Every time.
What?
Greg's phone goes off.
Nobody heard that.
Every time.
Every time.
Every
Nobody heard
episode.
It's my electrician that's going to come fix my house from the lightning strike.
All right. So, anyways, you're disagreeing.
So, and I would say mild disagreement because it's just, I guess it's just how I approach it is, I'm good when stuff's allegorical or symbolic, and I guess that's why I don't have issue with Potter or Marvel or stuff, because I know it's not affecting biblical truth. But when it comes to something that's The Chosen, where it's a lie, because I agree what you're saying. Like, he probably did camp on site. He might have done that, but if you really look at the technical, it's not true because we don't know. And so I, as apologist, can't support. I just can't get into those because I think it's too problematic, and and that's why I don't watch it, and that's why I don't support it, because I just think it creates too many issues, and I wouldn't want to be the one trying to. The Bible's enough, in my opinion, when it comes to that, and I think that's why I love the Word of Promise. And we're talking entertainment, the audiobook. I don't know if you've ever listened to it. It's like a dramatic.
Yeah. I have.
I'm a huge fan. I dramatize it, and it's got a lot of people that are not believers. Michael York. I mean, you go through the list of people who aren't believers who did it, but and I
Wait
see,
a minute, it has non-believers doing it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I see your point too. I think it's, and that's why I guess for me, where I think if I were going to do something like that, that's why I would have that disclaimer to say every episode.
Yeah.
Say, hey, look, we believe in the Bible. The Bible's truth. What we are trying to create is a way of honoring Jesus the Christ. We are not saying this is true. This is just what we think it might have looked like. Please don't take this as gospel truth. The gospel's found in the Bible. And I think you'd be more, but they don't do that. And that's my frustration with it. They don't, to me, that's a lack of reverence for the biblical truth.
Yeah, there's a possibility that you're right about that. I'm not going to disagree with that. I think that it would have been helpful. I think more helpful would have been a strong statement by Dale Jenkins after the fact to really support the idea of biblical truth, which just didn't happen, which I think is probably the bigger shame. But as far as, in the future, regardless of what studio it's produced in or whatever the case, we had this conversation in email. It's like people are, that are on the side of, well, it's like if there is the world involved, then it's not suitable for Christian, intake or whatever the case may be. It's like, well, good luck with that because that's not the way that the world works.
Right.
Even like movies like we were talking about the Kendrick brothers, the Courageous, and a few of their other movies that they had put out were all produced by Sony Affirm, which Sony Affirm is an arm of Sony Corporation, and Sony Corporation got an A+ rating from the LGBTQ community for their support. And so, you really, if you're going to take the stand that because this flag was here, I'm going to boycott it, then you really have to start thinking about how far you're willing to go with that.
Right.
And I just don't know that that's a possibility. Because you're never going to be on the high ground with that.
Yeah.
There's always going to be something. But that being said.
And it's not biblical. I mean, Daniel, he's the perfect example. You can live in the world. You can work as a second in command for one of the most evil empires that's ever existed.
Yeah.
And still be loved and approved by God.
Yeah. But for me, what's more important is the content. Right. I'm not concerned as much about the people that produce it as I am about the content. Like you had mentioned the Passion of the Christ, intensely
Roman Catholic
convicting movie.
Right.
But it is Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
It is the Stations of the Cross put in dramatic form, which that works out for us because they adhere to the same story that we do when it comes to the crucifixion of Christ. We just differ on a lot of other issues. But I'm not concerned about the fact that it's that it was produced by Catholics for Catholics by I'm just concerned about the content.
Yeah.
And I didn't see anything in it that led me to believe that, oh, well, wait a minute, this is the only thing that I remember in that was when the person that was representing Satan drew a line in the sand. There was
John 8:21.
There were some
41.
weird things in there that they took some weird scriptural liberties with.
Yeah.
But as far as like overall content, I didn't find it to be overly offensive, and that's kind of the way I look at The Chosen too. It's a story about the Gospels, but it is not the gospel. Right. That's what I think people need to understand about it. And if you're going to watch it, whether you are on the fence about it or not, if you decide that you're going to watch it, what you're going to see is you're going to see a dramatic representation of the Gospels. That's what you're going to see.
Would you recommend The Passion? And if so, what would be your warnings?
I mean, I think probably I would tell parents, if you're going to watch The Passion and if you're going to let your children watch The Passion, just be aware that it is a supremely violent and gory movie. And you need to know that going in. it's probably an accurate representation of what happened to Christ, which is why it's violent and
Powerful.
gory.
Yeah.
There's parts of it that'll probably make your stomach turn.
Yeah.
But it is probably an accurate representation of the crucifix.
But it reinforces that heroic aspect because, I mean, when he's getting whipped and he willingly climbs back on that to get whipped, it's just like, whoa, man.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what he went through is just,
Yeah.
it's powerful.
But see, that's the way that I feel about The Chosen, though.
Right.
You know, I mean, I feel like it finally portrays Christ in such a way that people can wrap their heads around, as far as, wow, this is a real person that I can view as a hero.
Right.
You know, not just an ideal. I think that's probably where we messed up, if I'm being honest, is we presented Christ as an ideal as opposed to a heroic person.
Right.
You know, The Chosen, I think, does a good job of presenting that aspect of it. But I think along with what Richard was saying, you know, I mean, I think that if you're going to do that, you have to be aware that this is just a story. If you want to know who the real Christ is, you need to read Scripture. You need to read the Bible.
Right.
And you really need to understand what he was talking about, because there's a lot of nuance in The Chosen that you don't pick up on based on the fact that there's just not enough theological context.
Right. And back to your point, right? If you did the Gospel of Mark, you'd be like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So there is some level of pressure, I imagine, as a producer, like, okay, we got to make this entertaining if we're going to have people watching it. You know, so that, I imagine that's a challenge to.
I think I would say that if you are a believer and you are judging The Chosen because of the pride flag, then just take a quick inventory of your life. You know, what have you tolerated because you enjoyed it? You know, do you like older movies that you might not think of as being pretty foul?
Oh man!
But a lot of the movies from the 50s and the 60s are crazy dirty.
Well,
you know,
Speaking of dirty, I mean, like Dirty Harry.
No,
You know,
And not even speaking about that, like just like some older films where there was just a lot of like sexuality, and it was all
70s.
cloaked. It was all cloaked.
It's funny.
There was a lot of it.
It's funny you mentioned that. You know, my wife was going to sit down with my daughter. They had time. The boys are out doing something. Like, hey, we'll have a daughter. We'll watch Breakfast at Tiffany's. And then she's like, halfway into it, and she's like, stop. We're done. And she's like, I had no clue at how raunch and how just
we've perverse, because we fantasize that the 50s and 60s were this innocent time where people were much better than they are today.
No, they hid it much better.
They were just better at hiding it, and it was not on the surface, but people were really dirty and foul.
Yeah.
And you know, misogyny was real. You know, you can say that it wasn't, but it was real back in those days.
Yeah.
It's hard fought, the equity that we've gotten to in today's society. But just beyond that, just the sexuality and the drinking and the, just like all that was normal, it was no big deal, but you could have all that stuff in there, but then Lucy and Des had to sleep in separate beds.
Yeah.
It was
so did Ozzy and Harriet.
Yeah, there was it was such a weird time period,
Yeah.
Now it's just like everything is out in the open. So I think what I would tell people is that don't be too harsh on these guys who and girls who are trying to produce Christian content. Don't be too harsh on them just because they are producing Christian content. Let's have a little bit of grace, because just because they've produced something that is Christian, quote unquote, doesn't necessarily mean that they're trying to be blasphemous or sacrilegious or anything like that. We got to think through the nuances of stuff before we just start having knee-jerk reactions to stuff.
Yeah.
And if you're going to start having knee-jerk reactions to The Chosen, you're going to have to start having knee-jerk reactions to other things, then you need to start really thinking about why you've started having knee-jerk reactions to just these specific things and why that hasn't been a thing before. Because the truth of it is that all movies, all entertainment, all things that we are partaking in this world, whether we like it or not, whether we choose to be a part of it or not, whether we're a part of it by necessity, there are portions of it that are worldly, secular, and sinful.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way that the world is. We are in the world, but we are not of the world. We have to understand that, like Daniel did. I'm sure Daniel understood that I have to get along with these people, but I don't have to agree with them.
Joseph
was
was the same
Yep.
situation, along with the Irwin brothers, the Kendrick brothers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those are. I mean,
Another
you wouldn't even put quotes around it. Those are Christian films.
Here's another piece of that, right? Like with the Kendrick brothers, and I've been on this I've been guilty of this as well. Some of their original movies, some of their early movies, and even some of their later movies are plagued by like mediocre acting, you know. And so it's easy to judge them for that. But I would say, guys, calm down. Everybody's got to start somewhere.
Yeah. And
right?
They didn't start with actors.
And Christian art, as far as movies are concerned, is in its infancy. Like, it's just being born.
Along with
like
Christian
there's
music.
You're not going to get high production movies. Like The Chosen is probably the most high production TV series movie that Christianity has ever taken part of. And that's saying something.
Yeah. But the redeeming value, if you can look at it. See, Adrienne is the same way. She doesn't like bad acting.
Yeah, it drives me crazy.
You know, I look at things like Flywheel, which was the Kendrick's first shot.
Boy, that one had some really terrible acting.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Really did.
But at the same time,
it's a good story.
It's a great story. It's a story of redemption, and portrayed as good as you can get for a church.
Yeah, all their stories are fairly.
and
the
each
same.
one got better.
Yeah,
You know, so
they
like-
have all gotten better over time.
And that's the good thing about entertainment. There's no requirement for if you don't like bad acting, just because it's a Christian show. There's no requirement for you to sit down and
Watch it.
Yeah,
That's
Right?
true.
yeah.
That's
Right?
true. I would encourage everybody I know to watch Flywheel.
Yeah,
you know, with
true.
The poor acting and all. I wouldn't call it bad. It's just poor. They weren't professionals.
Nah, it's pretty bad.
Right.
It's
But-
pretty bad.
but at the end of the day, this is all entertainment.
Yeah.
And so you have to, again, like you're saying, take it with a grain of salt,
Yeah.
give people grace, and realize what its purpose
It's
is
different.
to entertain. Could it be educational? Could it be inspirational, et cetera, et cetera? Absolutely.
I'll put it this way. Sitting down and watching all the episodes of The Chosen is not studying to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that needs not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth.
Right.
Okay.
It's not the same.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a show for entertainment value, and if you're really talking about entertainment, it's probably way better than some of the other crap that your kids are watching. So, you know, I would say that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
However, to Richard's point, don't look at it as if it's the gospel.
Right.
It's a dramatization of the gospel. It is not the gospel.
Right.
Yeah.
And it could be used. I mean, say you have somebody who refuses to read the Bible, but they've watched The Chosen. Hey, that's a doorway. It could, not saying there can't be positive doorways open for you to now give the gospel 100%, but I would caution people to use it like openly to be like, hey,
It's not an evangelical tool.
Exactly.
I'm gonna.
give to people.
I'll make one defense for like Harry Potter and Marvel movies. Right. I have used personally Harry Potter to begin a witnessing conversation with someone.
Yeah, it's Paul in the Areopagus.
Well, yeah.
Acts 17.
Yeah, let me tell you about the unknown God that you have.
You know what I mean? And I think that's probably the core of what I'm talking about. You know, it's like it's not always a bad thing to know what these things are about. And even to enjoy them, you know, I mean, it's because if you enjoy it, you become passionate about it. And if you're passionate about it, then that gives you an avenue to be able to talk to people about it. There's nothing inherently righteous or holy about football or baseball. In fact, it's probably as vile, if not more vile, in some of the movies that you're watching.
And there's enough analogies to Christ and heaven and hell and everything else.
I think, and I've said it from the pulpit, I think that most aspects of life can be boiled down to a football analogy.
Yes.
Buddy.
Football. Is that the round ball or is that the oblong one?
No, that's soccer you're thinking.
Oh, soccer. Yeah.
Nah, that's
Football. That's the most popular sport in the world. That's the one you're talking about.
If you want to
yes.
talk about blasphemy, that's blasphemy.
If you want to talk about
Using the word
the
football.
greatest sport in the world.
They
I don't
called
think
it
so.
football before we had the funny pigskin.
That's what we need to
Nah, I
have.
don't believe
Football
that.
versus football. We need to
I
have
don't
that
ac-
debate.
I don't accept your truth.
Yeah. No. I think it was in The Chosen. Weren't they playing
I don't accept
football
your truth.
in The Chosen? Some of the kids.
Well, they need to be fired. I'm boycotting.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, we've got 24 or more movies, quote unquote, Christian and others listed here.
And some of these I don't even.
Want to go to?
We don't really have time. But
No, we don't.
So it's real funny when you see that top on the Ten Commandments. So we sat down, and as a family, we
the
watched
top one on the list is the Ten Commandments.
We watched the Ten Commandments,
Charlton
Charlton Heston, and there's a hilarious part where Charlton Heston comes and he runs across this one guy. It was that that love story that's in it. That's just the weird, like I don't know where extra biblical, right? Love story. And he comes across the guy, and this is a family joke. Charlton Heston sees him, and he's like, "Oh, we thought you dead," and he picks him up like he's going to carry him. Then literally he walks 2 spaces and then throws him down or lets him down on a piece of rock. And it was just like, somebody come help. And it's like, why did you even pick him up?
Why even
It's
pick
like,
him up?
Like it was
What was the point?
yeah, it was the funniest scene. So we're always like that as a family. We thought you dead.
We thought you did.
Yeah, some of these I didn't even know were Christian movies, like Chariots of Fire. I had no idea that that was a Christian movie.
Well, again,
Yeah,
Catholic based.
It wasn't a Christian movie. It just had a Christian in it.
I think these are movies that have Christian. Like he has listed on here, Michael. This is the most ridiculous movie ever.
Yeah.
Michael, is that the one with John Travolta?
John Travolta.
Oh,
he's
geez.
Michael. He's fallen from
Archangel.
heaven,
I couldn't
and
watch
for
that.
some reason he smells like cookies. Like it's like it.
Isn't that the one where he gets drunk and does all of the kind of crazy stuff?
The
just
writer of that movie was just like, what can we do to make Christianity look stupid?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty
Hey,
much what
let's
that
do
was all
this.
about.
Let's take one of their top angels and
I mean, if you're on Michael in there, you might as well have, what's that one movie with Keanu Reeves where,
Constantine.
is it Constantine? Yeah,
Where
you might as
he's-
well have Constantine in this list.
That's a pretty trippy movie. Actually.
Right, but it's about as Christian as Michael.
Michael.
Didn't he do a second one?
I
Didn't
don't
they
think
just
he
come
did.
out? I think they were producing a second one.
Really?
Yeah, I think he's coming out with a second one.
It's an entertaining movie.
yeah.
John Wick. You ever seen any of those?
That's Christian all the way.
Not necessarily Christian, but if we're talking about Keanu Reeves,
Yeah.
The first was good. The second and third, I'm just like, just so much gratuitous.
We are violent pastors. We love that stuff.
Yeah.
I enjoyed John Wick. I enjoyed
Have you seen
all
the fourth?
of them. Yes, and
okay.
I haven't seen the last one,
Okay,
but the last one was the one where the critics are talking about Academy Award stuff with it.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, you know what happens in the fourth? I don't want to
No,
say.
I didn't.
Okay,
No, I
okay.
haven't seen it
Anyway,
yet. I don't know.
Spoiler alert.
I'll stop.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, anyways, that's that. But Fireproof, Courageous, all those were good. Case for Christ.
Mm-hmm.
That was a
good.
decent one.
It was a decent.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a day in the life of, basically.
Probably one of the most biblically accurate movies for Christianity of all time. Evan Almighty.
Yes. Oh, I bought that. It's on the shelf, man.
Yeah.
We watch it. Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
so funny that one's
annually.
listed, not Bruce Almighty.
Morgan Freeman as God makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
Wonderful voice.
building an ark in your community, save it from
Yeah.
the dam break. Oh, sorry, spoilers.
That
Yeah,
was
yeah.
fun to watch. though.
Obviously, they didn't.
I mean, I really focused on that art. They had to do that.
Yeah.
That wasn't CG. They were building this stupid ark.
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
I can
They were
only
building this
imagine.
ark.
I can only imagine it was good.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I wonder if they use that for the ark encounter.
No, it's not big enough. It's not big enough. What's that? Ben-Hur.
Ben-Hur is
yeah,
not on
that's one
here.
that's
Yeah.
not often referred to as a Christian
Yeah.
movie, but it is.
That
it's
was,
biblically.
that
It's
was-
based in biblical times.
right.
That was from
And
our
it actually-
producer,
It is
Brandon.
a story of redemption. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the whole point. Is he comes,
Doesn't it
he comes
actually-
to Christ.
Doesn't actually show
It shows
the
Christ,
crucifixion.
Yeah.
but it doesn't show his face. Never shows the face of Christ.
Yeah.
Do you know who wrote Ben-Hur?
No.
Yeah, it was his granddaughter of, wasn't it?
No.
I had wrong.
No, it's trippy. It was the governor of Texas during the time of Billy the Kid. The same governor wwho promised to
Lew Wallace.
The same governor who promised to pardon Billy Kidd, but ended up not, supposedly. But yeah, he's a guy in 1800s Texas, and if you've seen the book,
He was a Union general in the Civil War.
Yeah, if you've seen the book, it's like 1,200 pages, and you think J.K. Rowling is detailed? Like, it is excruciating detail,
Yeah.
and it's all.
Let's face it, he didn't have anything better to do at night.
But it's. But in 1800s Texas, to write this book about Middle Eastern customs and culture is just very fascinating.
Thousands of years earlier.
Like, when you hear that, you're just shocked that he's the guy who wrote that book.
That's interesting. He was the United States minister resident to the Ottoman Empire in the 1880s.
Wow.
That's a
That
weird thing.
That's probably
where
where
he got it.
he got a lot of his history from.
Yeah.
Interesting. That is interesting. So yeah, it's the another one that is really biblically based, Noah with
Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally right out of scripture, right?
I was surprised the robe.
The name was right out of Scripture. I don't know if anything else
I'm
was.
surprised the robe didn't make it on here.
The Rogue.
Robe.
Robe.
Oh, the robe.
The robe with
Exodus is on there with Christian Bale. Yeah.
I never saw that one.
Is that the Christian Bale Exodus? Or
Yeah. Exodus was the Christian Bale one. Yeah, I mean, other than their portrayal of God, I mean, I think it was a fairly accurate portrayal of the Exodus. Their God in that was really weird. Like, it was like they portrayed him as a little child, like a spoiled, rotten, angry little child. It was literally. So it was kind of, that was weird. But the journey itself, you know, I mean, it was pretty normal. The Red Sea, you know, parted, and it really kind of highlighted Moses's inner turmoil and struggles with God, you know, in a way
there
that
was plenty.
pretty realistic.
Yeah.
But I mean, certainly not scriptural. It was more story based, which is a great story. Why wouldn't people tell it? You know, so
the occult, demonic, and satanic.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, you know, and it just depends
We covered
on
most of those, didn't we?
Yeah.
We didn't cover The Exorcist. Did we talk about The Exorcist?
Yeah, I mean, that's demonic because there's demons in it.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
But it's really a story
Catholic
about
priests.
it's actually based on a true story, actually.
Yeah.
So that's scary.
And you know, I heard a story, true or not, I don't know. Linda Blair, I think, played the young lady in that years ago. And they said that they filmed the scenes from the end towards the beginning so that she would not have to go through the same procedures and processes that the character she was portraying in that.
It was probably hard to get her to where she could turn her head all the way around.
Yeah.
A lot of training
About
goes
killed
into
her.
that. Yeah, a lot of training goes into that. Her stunt. They had to pull in a stunt person for that.
Yeah. It was an owl. Played that part.
Well, not even owls can turn their head all the way 360.
around. It just looks that way.
All right. Well, there's a lot there, and I hope you benefited from this conversation.
And
Greg, you got any last words? We got to shut it down.
Oh, we got to shut it down. Dang it.
Yeah.
The 10 highest grossing Christian movies, according to Satan himself. I would have just...
What?
I've
Rotten
never even heard of The Star. Number 10. But number 1, Passion of the Christ. Never seen it.
Oh,
But I'll have to go with your guys's.
well, it actually grossed way higher than any other movie.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
War Room didn't do bad, $67 million. I mean, but
I can only imagine.
War Room was another one that I found the
Acting was
irritating.
marginal.
It's irritating.
I did like the prayer of the old woman, though. I mean,
See,
she got into it.
I don't know. I'd see that part to me was not believable.
Really?
I didn't believe that at all. It was very, I guess because she was passionate, people buy into it, but I don't. That's not the way that I envision people praying. But I mean, maybe it is. But not only that, the way that she acted was just it was too much. I didn't really feel.
I didn't care for her acting.
I
write
didn't,
that one prayer.
I didn't relate with her. We just didn't connect, you know. So, but I'm just overly picky when it comes to acting.
So, if you're out there and you'd like to come on the show, give us a call at 3P.
Yeah, I'd love to have a conversation.
What's
with
it called again? 3P.
Yeah, and again,
that bar
that stands. You know, I mean, if you are a person of a different faith and you want to come on and have a conversation about how you got there, I'd love to talk to a Satanist. I would love to talk to an imam. I would love to talk to a rabbi. I would love to talk to a Latter-day Saints. I would love to talk to a Jehovah's Witness. I would love to sit down and have a conversation with them.
So,
Matt
Walsh, Dennis Prager, you guys, I know you listen to this. We
really
want to have you.
Well, Matt Walsh is Catholic.
Yeah.
Dennis Prager is Jewish.
Dennis Prager is Jewish. Yeah. So, yeah, I would love to have a conversation with him.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro, all the big names are listening.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. You got any last words?
Are you done with your last words?
No. He skipped me. I went.
No, I didn't. I
He
said,
literally
do you have,
said,
I
yeah, last
literally
words.
said, do you have any
you
last words?
You started reading the
But then,
list.
I diverted, and then he skipped me.
Well,
how's that?
Okay, what's your last
All right,
words?
my last words. You want
Hurry
me to go
up.
first.
Hurry
up.
Okay, you're done.
Guys,
you're finished.
Whatever you do, whatever movies you watch it with prayer and with biblical understanding in your heart. And if you don't have biblical understanding in your heart, then read your stinking Bible.
Yeah. No substitute.
No substitute. You got to know what that word says.
Yep. No substitute, that's for sure. Richard, you got any last words?
Yeah, just along those lines, just this topic has been about entertainment, and the point of this is we live in a fallen world, and we're not encouraging, and I guess what we are trying to encourage is this is entertainment, and you have to be wise in your choices, as Pastor Greg says, and those things that inspire you, those things that draw you closer to God, edify you, but only you can make those decisions, and you've got to be wise in what you do, and be discerning in what you put in, because there's a consequence. Like you can't get this mindset that I can watch Game of Thrones, I can watch all this stuff, and there's no consequences for consuming that, because I think that's a very faulty mindset.
Yeah,
and at the same time, I think we do have to be a little bit better about being gracious with those Christian, and I'll convict myself on this one. We need to be more gracious with those Christian artists willing to get out there and try to at least go against the mainstream and at least try to get something positive out there, because if we keep being so critical of these Christian artists for every little misstep, for every little expectation, for every little thing, what we're going to end up in is a world where our children have no opportunity to see anything that's not vile,
and they will become critical.
Wicked. Right. And so let's have some grace. Let's put some, and for those producing it, have the boldness to put a disclaimer out there. Hey, you know, I'm just trying to make something, but I'm not trying to reproduce the gospel. The gospel's found in the Bible.
And when you have an opportunity to make a strong statement, make a strong statement.
Be bold.
Yeah, be bold. I would agree with that for sure. All right. Well, that about does it for us today. As always, we thank you for joining us. If you have a comment, question, or an idea for an episode, send us an email at 3p@athelbaptistchurch.org. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you, Athel Baptist Church, and your members for their generous support of this ministry. And again, thank you for listening. And until next time, remember the Great Commission. Go into all the world, reach the lost with the gospel, and build disciples who can do the same. And with that, we are out.